Our call to worship. May we be reminded here of our highest aspirations and inspired to bring our gifts of love and service to the altar of humanity. May we know once again that we are not isolated beings, but connected in mystery and miracle to the universe, to this community, and to each other. Please join me in our chalice lighting words. We kindle this flame to remind ourselves of the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment.
Good morning, and welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist Society of Burlington, Vermont. Today is Sunday, July 30th, 2023, and in today's historical calendar, it is the anniversary of the signing into law of Medicare and Medicaid by President Lyndon B. Johnson in 1965. On a personal note, a year or two later, I was in D.C. with my grandfather, who was being honored at a reception at the White House, and I shook the president's hand. And I remember looking up, because LBJ was very tall, 6'4" or something. Okay. This is our first outdoor Sunday worship service held in the shade of the tall ash trees and in the shadow of our steeple. This will continue through September 3rd. In case of rain, we will hold the services, childcare, and coffee hour indoors. And I'd like to especially to thank our property managing staff, Blake Ewaldson, Darrell Field, Phil Brentwood, and volunteer David Call, our technical team, Woody Fulton, Memphis Everest, and our musical director, James Stewart, and musician Sam Whitesell, for all of this outdoor setup and preparation. So, okay, all right. Whoever they are. We acknowledge that this UU meeting house and many of our homes, our schools, places of work, parks, are built on the traditional lands of the Western Abenaki peoples. We remember the hardship and violence the Abenaki have endured because of colonialism and white supremacy. We give thanks for the opportunity to share this place, protect it, care for all those who live here, and engage in social justice on behalf of the Abenaki. I'm Melinda Lee, a member of the Worship Associate team here, and this morning I have the pleasure of introducing to you our guest minister, the Reverend Connie Yost from Portland, Oregon. Yeah, thank you. Reverend Yost is an ordained Unitarian Universalist minister, currently serving as the president of the Board of Farm Worker Ministry Northwest, and serves on the board of the National Farm Worker Ministry. She is the founder and coordinator of Friends Stay Warm, a nonprofit ministry dedicated to supporting low-wage workers and immigrant detainees through cash assistance and advocacy. She serves also on the Faith Labor Committee of Portland, Oregon, Jobs with Justice, and is on the UUA Poor People's Campaign Leadership Council. She is in Burlington for a conference and an action, and we're grateful for her presence and her important message for us. Unitarian Universalists come from many traditions and backgrounds, and we welcome all who share our concern to build a local and world community based on love, compassion, justice, respect, and care for the environment, and for looking for meaning in their lives. We strive to be an inclusive congregation, welcoming all people into becoming beloved community for one another. It's a pleasure to see you all here today, and wonderful also to know that more people are joining us through our live streaming service. Hello out there, and in the week to come. If you are here for the first or second time and are here in person, would you be willing to raise your hand so we can give you a warm, special introduction? In the back, in the back, in the back. Thank you. All right. Our welcome ambassadors today are Susan Warner-Mills and Marilyn Brill, and they and all of us will be delighted to connect with you and answer any questions you might have about our society. Those of you who are joining us through the live stream can connect through our website, uusociety.org, and we would be very glad to hear from you. Our very few announcements today are that summer child care is available in the Memorial Garden just around the corner here, and please sign in if you have children to bring there. And following the service, all are welcome to outdoor coffee hour held in the same area, and there will also be handouts and flyers about Reverend Connie's important work, and they'll be spread out on the white table there. So we are about to begin. Come, welcome. It is good to worship together.
One of the things I love about being in the UU is that we get to sing hymns that are not necessarily traditional. So our first hymn is written by Woody Guthrie. Invite you to sing with us. We handed out the words for you because we'll be able to go back and forth to the familiar lyrics, of course, but there's quite a few stanzas to this song, and we're going to be singing quite a few of them together. Invite you to stand if you're able in body or spirit, and we'll sing. This land is your land, this land is my land, from California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. Good. Now here's one of those verses. As I was walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway. I saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me. This land is my land. This land is your land. From California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. I roamed and rambled, I roamed and rambled. I followed my footsteps to the sparkling sands of her diamond deserts, and all around me a voice was sounding. This land was made for you and me. As I went walking, I saw a sign there, and on that sign said, no trespassing. But on the other side, it didn't say nothing. That side was made for you and me. This land is your land. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. In the shadow of the steeple, I saw my people. By the reluctance, I saw my people. As they stood hungry, I stood there asking, is this land made for you and me? This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. Can we sing in just our voices? This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. Thank you so much for your singing. You may be seated.
As we let the beauty of the music and the message of this song settle into us, let us deepen together into a time of meditation and come into a place of holy listening. First, I will read the joys and sorrows of our community that have been sent to us, and then there will be a time of silence. After this, during the music, you may come up and take a stone from the basket and place it on the table as a symbol of a particular joy or sorrow you are holding within you. And at the same time, you may place an offering in the second basket. That will be shared with an organization called Steps to End Domestic Violence, whose mission it is to assist all who have been affected physically, sexually, emotionally, and economically by domestic abuse. So let's take a moment to breathe in the breath of peace and breathe out the breath of love. Again, inhaling peace and exhaling love. Joys and sorrows for Sunday, July 30th. Joys and thanks for the return of a sunny summer day. Sorrow for the continuing flooding in many parts of Vermont and other states. May there be relief sent in all directions. May the joys and sorrows of each of us be the joys and sorrows of all of us, reminding us of our shared humanity. Now for a moment of silence. Please join me in the offering dedication words. With gratitude, we dedicate these gifts in the service of our mission to inspire spiritual growth, care for each other and our community, seek truth, and act for justice. The reading for today, chosen by Reverend Yost, is the excerpt of a letter by the Reverend Dr. William Barber, who was co-leader of the National Poor People's Campaign. And the letter is entitled, "A Moral Declaration for America, Our Shared Task of Building the Nation That's Never Yet Been." To the President of the United States, to the Congress, and to all the people of this republic who claim to be on the side of love, truth, and justice, one miraculous day, all Americans may rise to the moral mandate of obeying the unenforceable natural law that all humans are created equal and that we each have the right to enjoy the earth. But until then, all we have in this American democracy to protect people against oppression, domination, and man-made, human-made evil systems that value riches over human lives are our laws. Laws derived from our Constitution and rooted in the biblical principles of justice. As the nation turns 247 years old, we find ourselves amid an orchestrated moral crisis, and it is up to people of moral conscience to hold this nation accountable to itself. Finger-pointing at extremists is a wasteful exercise that wrongfully whittles this moment in our history down to a difference of opinion rather than a crisis of civilization. From the original lie of racism created solely to justify slavery for economic gain, to the Southern strategy over the last 50 years that pits black and white poor people against each other and creates divisive cultural wars along partisan lines, the American aristocracy has had only one goal: to divide and conquer the people and distract them from the widening gulf of prosperity in the wealthiest nation.
Well, thank you, Melinda. Good morning. Thank you for inviting me to speak with you today. As Melinda said, I'm on the board of the National Farm Worker Ministry, and we just completed a 3-day board meeting here over at Champlain College. And on Friday, we did an action with farm workers, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But I was really happy when Tricia said, yes, you can preach on the Sunday. So that worked out very well. Thank you. Yes, the action we did was with an organization I know some of you are involved with or have been in the past, called Migrant Justice, here in Burlington. And back in, yes, I had never met with them before, but yeah, impressive, very impressive. So what they, when we do our board meetings in different locations around the country, we try to, do an actual action with farm workers while we're in a location. So this one was with Migrant Justice and with the farm workers that they identified, and we went out as far as 2 hours away to pick up the farm workers to come for the action. So that happened on Friday out at the Hannaford grocery store out on Shelburne Road. So I don't know if any of you folks were able to come, but I did see a UU minister colleague from Joan from Montpelier. She was there with a couple of folks wearing their Poor People's Campaign T-shirts, but I'm pretty sure they were UUs as well. So that was awesome. But I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So we are the people of this republic who claim to be on the side of love, truth, and justice. That's the Reverend Dr. William Barber said in his letter to the president. I know we are, right? We care about justice, or injustice and justice. We care about inequality, and we care about oppression. We believe in the inherent worth and dignity of all people. We care about the earth and all living beings. And we try, each in our own way, to bring justice to the earth and to all living beings. But it's hard, right? It's hard. It takes a long time. I'll tell you, when you're working with farm workers, we're getting into maybe centuries. It takes so long. And I don't know about you, but I get discouraged, I get tired, I get angry. And oh, yeah, so tired. In the words of Fannie Lou Hamer, we get sick and tired of being sick and tired, right? And in his letter to the president, Reverend Barber says that in 1967, Dr. King spoke about his painful discovery that many people who supported the work in Selma and Birmingham were not now willing to go all the way because they were only really outraged by the extremists' behavior rather than believing in genuine equality. He says it was easy to move people to action when fire hoses and brutal beatings were commonplace. But getting Americans to take sustained action against oppression has proven difficult over the last 50 years because oppression has been intricately woven into the fabric of our socioeconomic reality as a result of politicians, Democrats and Republicans alike, doling out compromise after compromise and displaying an unwillingness to go all the way on justice. That's what Dr. Barber wrote in his letter. He says, the language of left versus right, conservative versus liberal, can no longer be used to determine where people stand. Yeah. So, this is where the farm workers come in. I'm getting on in years. No, I know. My birthday's like next Sunday. Oh, gosh. Thank you. But it's been on my mind, yeah. And over the years now, I've, out of self-preservation, had to pare down my ministry to, some of you understand, you only have so much energy to go around. So you have to be conservative and cautious and really prioritize, So I decided, as much as all these things are so important, I was going to pare mine down to economic justice. So farm workers, number one, but I also do some other standing with workers in my local area of Portland, Oregon, through our Jobs with Justice. So that's really where I put the majority of my energy. But, Tricia, when I talked to her about preaching here, she says, well, tell them why, you're doing this, why you care. And, yeah, okay. So I thought about it. I thought, well, I think I came to farm worker justice kind of accidentally. But, if you believe in accidents. When I moved to Portland in 2013, I was running a nonprofit that provided fiscal sponsorship for the nonprofits that were new or didn't want to get a, tax-exempt status, the 501c3 with the IRS. So one day, my doorbell rang at home, and a young lady introduced herself as the operations manager of Western Farm Workers Association, which I didn't know because I had just moved to town. She says they were a voluntary association of farm workers and other low-wage workers And by choice, they didn't have a 501c3 tax exempt status, and they weren't going to be getting one, but they were already in escrow on a building that they wanted to buy in Portland to use as their office because they had lost the space that they used to have, and they were working out of somebody's basement, and it really just wasn't working out. So they had a donor who wanted to give them the down payment, but it was going to come from their family trust or something. It had to go to a 501c3. So she said, can you help us? And I go, oh boy, it's already in escrow. So it's like, I had to fly into action right away. I had to call up president of the board, and, we thought, okay, yeah, sure. And so she got one of her board people or who was a lawyer to help. We drafted a contract and got everything. Did everything like in a matter of a day or two. And then in the end, we're at the bank or the escrow office signing all the paperwork and everything. And the donor, who I guess was in New York or something, decided just to give them all the money, the entire purchase price. And pay our fee too. So that helped us. So that started my relationship with Western farm workers in Hillsboro, Oregon. I then found out through my church, I was then affiliated with First Unitarian Church, one of our larger churches downtown Portland, and somebody found out I was doing something with Western farm workers, and they knew about Farm Worker Ministry Northwest, so asked me if I would like to, come to a meeting, maybe get on the board so he could get off, one of those things. And so that's what started my relationship with Farm Worker Ministry Northwest. And since Farm Worker Ministry Northwest is a member organization of National Farm Worker Ministry, that's how I came to be on the board of National Farm Worker Ministry. So I always think that it wasn't an accident that Leisha rang my doorbell that day, because I did have a heart for farm workers. It didn't actually just come out of the blue. My ancestors were poor farmers in Germany and in the United States. My father was an avid gardener and an urban farmer. And like him, I draw my strength from my garden, from the earth, from being out in nature. And my first ministry down in Los Angeles was a job training and leadership development program for at-risk youth who worked on our 5-acre organic farm. I actually, that's a whole nother sermon, but where would I get 5 acres of land to farm in LA? It seemed impossible, but it happened. The kids worked with the farmer. We had a teacher. They did some leadership development. They talked about goals. Many of them didn't think they had any future, but we tried to help them think of one, that sort of thing. And they weren't there to learn how to be farmers, but how to just be kids and feel good about their future, and also the food system and growing things with the farmer. So sometimes elderly people from the community would come by. Many of them had been farm workers, and they'd tell stories about, the horrific discrimination, segregation, everything. And sadly for me, I tried to visualize like what the area used to look like when it was full of orange groves and walnut trees, and instead of all these freeways. Anyhow, so that's my background, my link, I guess, into the world of farm work. So Reverend Barber notes how Martin Luther King Jr. recognized that the fight for economic justice, because that's what he was doing, if you remember, in 1968 in Memphis when he was murdered, he was there because the garbage collectors, the sanitation workers, were going on strike, and they were considered the lowest of the low, very similar to farm workers. And he was there to support them because he had turned his ministry towards economic justice, and of course the Vietnam War was part of what he was concerned about too. So, but he recognized after the successes of the Voting Rights Act and some of the civil rights things that happened in the 60s, that it was going to be difficult for some of the same people who were able to come to Selma, like in Birmingham, and support the marches and the rallies. You know, like even our own UU minister, James Reeb, was in Selma, unfortunately clubbed and later died because of his injuries. So, you know, they did have a groundswell of a lot of support coming from people that were out of the area, people of all different races and backgrounds who came to support them. But he could see that it was going to be different with the economic justice fight. So where are we now for farm workers? How many of you ever see a farm worker? Yay! Cool. Do you drive by while they're working, or? Yeah, okay. Well, you know, for me, I don't see them because I live in the city, and I don't go by where they're working. So, you know, that's part of the problem. Too often the brutal and backbreaking work of farm workers, it's invisible. They're invisible. In fact, Friday, when we went to pick up our farm worker family, it was a whole family, I honestly thought we were going to be lost because we were kept going back in the woods, back, the road's deteriorating. I'm freaking out. I'm thinking, if this GPS stops working, I don't know what to do. But eventually we found them, and they were living in the woods in a kind of a tented trailer, but what didn't even have hard sides. It was a tent more. And anyhow, but you know, that's the thing. Most of us don't see the fields and the factories and the laborers out there. We don't see them working in the fire evacuation zones or dying alone in the field during 105-degree weather. These are things that have happened in Oregon, just in Oregon in the last 3 years. And they're happening. And as we know, like this year, so much heat. So many places are super hot. Very, very dangerous for the folks that work outside. So we don't see Diego and his family working on a farm producing Hannaford brand milk. And we don't see Diego's mother being beaten so severely by a supervisor that she lost consciousness. We do not see her and Diego then being fired. We do not see Jesus trapped beneath a broken tractor at another farm producing Hannaford brand milk. Complaints to Hannaford's Speak Up line about the broken tractor had gone unanswered for 4 months and then dismissed. Part of Jesus' foot had to be amputated as a result when I guess the tractor fell on him then. We don't see Jesus, but we eat, right? It affects us all. We all eat and benefit from the work of the farm workers. So Migrant Justice created the Milk with Dignity program in 2014 to provide a solution to the systemic problems plaguing the dairy industry, where immigrant farm workers labor long hours in dangerous conditions for low pay and live in substandard housing, like tarps and tents. It recognizes that a corporate-controlled industry places downward pressure on the farmers' incomes, and profits rise for the few when milk prices are low for the many. So the Milk with Dignity program ensures farm workers' right to work with dignity and have fair housing. It provides economic justice for both the farm workers and the farmers. And importantly, it's an enforceable contract with a third-party monitoring body which audits and investigates workers' complaints and lays out a path to improvement. And that's so crucial. You know, they're not unionizing the workers, but they have a program that allows the workers to have a voice, and most importantly, it's enforceable, and there's a process by which, when these complaints come to the fore, they're looked at, they're addressed, and it's to the benefit of everyone. So Ben and Jerry signed on to the program in 2017, and the pressure's been on Hannaford to join the program to reduce the severe human rights abuses in their supply chain. To date, Migrant Justice reports that Hannaford continues their cynical attempts to sweep the abuses under the rug. And so we, as consumers of dairy products and people of conscience, must join the actions that migrant justice and farm workers call for. We must shine a light on the problem and make the people who feed us visible. We must be there with our love and support, advocating with the farm workers and letting them know we will act with them. I can't tell you how many times we hear this from the farm workers. Gee, thank you. You know, we feel so isolated. You know, we didn't know, you know, and so when they see us out there with them, it makes a huge difference. In fact, in Washington State, where Farm Worker Ministry Northwest was important, I mean, National Farm Worker Ministry and Northwest Ministry were really important in helping that some berry workers up in Washington State form a union and get a contract, and this was back in about 2016. But it was, you know, and they will tell you, it was when folks from the National Farm Worker Ministry and other community members from the area came out and stood with them. And then the management saw, wow, okay, you know, people care about this. It's not just these berry workers, it's all these people. Makes a difference. It really, really does. So many people don't know that when FDR created the New Deal, with the New Deal program that created the National Labor Relations Act in 1935, it explicitly excluded domestic workers and farm workers. Why? They were black, right? In 88 years, that law has not changed. 88 years. Though the faces of the farm workers have changed from black now to mostly Latinx. What we have today is a handful of states which have enacted laws that give farm workers the right to organize a union, but it's certainly not a national right. And even with the right to organize, very few farm workers are part of a union. It's estimated that only about 4% of the farm workers belong to a union. And sadly, even the United Farm Workers of Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta has declined from about a membership of 60,000 to maybe only 6,000 today. So reasons abound for this, beyond just the lack of the federal labor law, but also various states have different laws that make it extremely difficult to do any kind of organizing. A lot of legislation is in support of farmers, and that can be to the detriment of the farm workers, and the fact that about 50% of the farm workers in this country are undocumented, which has a whole nother set of problems. So to me, this is the orchestrated moral crisis that Reverend Barber speaks of. We deliberately fail to enact laws or to enforce the few laws that we have that would give the farm workers a living wage, a path to citizenship. We have people been working undocumented farm work for years and years and years, and we can't even give them a way to become a citizen while the farmers are crying for help. We need more farm workers. Anyway, for me, that's why it's so important that programs like Milk with Dignity succeed. It's built on the successful model of the tomato farm workers down in Florida. Immokalee, the Coalition of Immokalee Workers, if you've heard of that. And they were able to so they go after the big buyers. That's why Hannaford is in the mix here. Because these big buyers say, with the tomatoes, Taco Bell, McDonald's, Walmart, they convinced them that to only buy the tomatoes that were grown under this fair food program. Now, Wendy's was the holdout, didn't want to do it. And so that's why the coalition calls for a boycott of Wendy's, just as an aside. Don't go to Wendy's. Boycotting Wendy's. And in fact, in the packet that he has, there's a letter. National Farm Worker Ministry is asking everybody to take the letter, take a copy of the letter, and go to your local Wendy's and explain what this letter says about why you're not going to be shopping there and what the situation is. Yeah, Wendy's response to that when it was going on, this was about 10 years ago, when all the others were signing on to these agreements, they just pulled out of the Florida tomato situation completely and was last I heard, buying from Mexico only, where the abuses are even worse. So there you go. Anyway, it's a long, hard struggle to bring justice to farm workers in the United States. We've, federal legislation. I mean, I was excited when President Biden got elected. We got some federal legislation introduced again, but of course, then it died. Visa programs to bring in so-called guest workers for farm workers is the H-2A visa. They sound really good, guaranteed wage, housing, meals. But in reality, too often can end up with the labor contractors exploiting the people. Even a farm worker was on a highway out of Raleigh, North Carolina, begging for food. And that's how his situation came to light in the news, because he was, they're supposed to feed you, but he wasn't getting enough to eat even. So, yeah. And water. Water and breaks for the shade and the whole heat and smoke, because with the wildfire, there's just a lot. So, we have a slogan, National Farm Worker Ministry. Did you eat today? Yes. Thank a farm worker. And that's what I wish we all could do. But most of us don't know any farm workers personally. They live on the farm housing or tucked away in segregated communities. They are invisible for the most part. We have to make an effort to meet them, thank them, and support them. So that's what I'm asking you to do today. Reverend Barber reminds us that we need to get beyond the blame of why things are the way they are and who is most to blame for the bad laws, no laws, and so on. We make progress, then there is backlash. We make progress, etc. For farm workers, this goes on for decades. Centuries? I hope not. We have to keep trying anyway. I'm convinced that if more of us actually knew the people who feed us, we would do everything we can to help them secure the justice and dignity they deserve. Last year, I heard from farm worker women speak of the sexual harassment they experience in the fields. When we asked about wage theft, one woman said she didn't know about that because she never even saw her paycheck. It went directly to her husband. And this was like 2022. So I urge you to get to know your farm workers. Join with farm worker organizations such as Milk with Dignity. I personally love going to farm worker rallies and actions, and especially where they end with a big celebration, which we did at Hannaford. Then they bring in the food, yay, and it's always fun. They have the best parties, and the farm worker families that I have met are always so gracious and welcoming, and they always make me feel part of the family. And I invite you to subscribe to the National Farm Worker Ministry e-news. I have a sign-up sheet, and I'll be over there at the white table. And they have some excellent resources on the website. One set of resources is called Harvest of Justice, and every year it's a different topic, but they've kept them posted from past years. They just posted the newest one, which is on racism in agriculture, but there's also a really great one there, child labor in agriculture, I think sexism in agriculture. I can't remember all, but different topics, because unfortunately for farm workers, there's just a lot of problems. You know, it really is a serious talk about intersectionality. I mean, unfortunately, they have everything going on wrong for them. And he will have the flyers too, if you're interested for more information. So I stand with the farm workers as an important part of my ministry. And it really is the most satisfying part, because I'm connected to the real people, the real workers and their families. Real people with real lives and real concerns and a real struggle in which I can lend my support, my time, my money, my presence. Just being there is so important. Through farm worker advocacy, I come to know the workers as people and share in the struggle. It's so deeply personal and connecting. That's why I do it. Standing with workers is my way of making my values real in the world. It's my way of doing justice. I know it matters. I hope you will join with the farm workers. Your presence is needed. Amen and blessed be. Do I introduce the hymn? Oh, well, the hymn. We have the hymn. Yeah.
So here we have a couple of favorite songs that we sing. And we don't have the projection and we don't have our hymnals, so we'll have to use our memories. And if this is a song that's unfamiliar to you, then just let the words and the message wash over you. But if you know this song, I invite you to sing along with me, and maybe we can remind ourselves of the chorus. We are answering the call of love, hands joined together as hearts beat as one, emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are answering the call of love. Kind of, remember it? Let's sing it together. You ready, Sam? The promise of the Spirit, faith, hope, and love abide, and so every soul is blessed and made whole. The truth in our hearts is our guide. We're answering. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are answering the call of love. Sometimes we build a barrier to keep love tightly bound, corrupted by fear, unwilling to hear, denying the beauty we found. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one, emboldened by faith, dare to proclaim we are answering the call of love. A bright new day is dawning, when love will not divide, reflections of grace in every embrace, fulfilling the vision divine. One more time, we are answering. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one, emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim. We are answering the call of love. We are answering the call of love. Thank you so much.
Please join in our chalice extinguishing words. I guess it's out. Okay. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts and share with the world until we are together again. Benediction from Martin Luther King Jr., who you can tell is my favorite. Social progress never rolls in on the wheels of inevitability. It comes through the tireless efforts and the persistent work of dedicated individuals in order to realize the American dream of economic justice and the brotherhood of man. Men and women all over the nation must continue to work for it. Si se puede.